Hello and welcome to Original Soundchat, where video game music is a work of art. On each episode, it's our goal to help you learn about 2 soundtracks from the world of games, as well as the people, stories, and critical tracks behind them. My name is DeVader.
And I'm Peter Spezia. We're brought to you by Anonymous Dinosaur and Rhymes with Asia. It's time to appreciate great OSTs and the games that they come from without getting too bogged down in music theory. Joe, what are this week's games?
Up first is 2001's Advance Wars, the turn-based strategy game that, despite a very unfortunate release date, flipped Nintendo's views on Western tastes and opened the door for games like Fire Emblem to finally leave Japan.
Following that is the Platinum Games character action adventure that focuses on controlling 2 characters at once in combat, a police officer and their loyal chimera tethered by a psychic bond. 2019's Astral Chain. They're Nintendo-published games, and they both start with A. That's about it, I think, between Advance Wars and Astral Chain this week.
Yeah, I cannot think of any other possible theme between these 2 games. Also, in terms of, tone, maybe Advance Wars has a dog mascot somewhere. I don't know. I have no idea.
Maybe, but it's about time for Advance Wars to finally be covered on this show, and we'll be certainly looking forward to talking about that. Joe, how are you doing? What are you playing?
Well, I've been continuing burning through a bunch of 3DS games that I missed back in the day. I've been doing some of the shorter ones. So I finished Samus Returns. I didn't like the final boss at all.
Yeah, it's not great.
It's too long. It's way too... If I have to skip 2 separate cutscenes in the span of your boss, it's too long. I also played a game called the Starship Dam Ray, which is a quote-unquote horror game that Level 5 published. It was interesting. That's about the most I could say about it. And then I played Kirby Planet Robobot.
Oh, yeah.
It was a pretty good game. And otherwise... Like I said last week, I'm replaying the To the Moon trilogy, and this week was Finding Paradise. I don't know if it's the distance or what, but I feel like I appreciate that game a lot more now than I did in 2017. I liked it. I liked it back then. I liked it even more now, especially being able to see the foreshadowing of what's coming up and see all the signs of it. And also just, I don't know, a couple of the later scenes got me a lot harder than they did originally. And, I don't know. It's a very, very good game. And next week is Imposter Factory, so look forward to grief from me next week.
Well, that's really good to hear. I've definitely been thinking about that trilogy of games, and for myself not to play Imposter Factory, it's do I go through them again and then maybe buy and play it? So I've definitely been keeping that in mind. I finished and 100% achievemented Life is Strange 2 Colors. And that was a good time. Pretty easy to see the twist coming, as you gotta have a twist at the end of episode 4. Not too surprising there. I was telling you, there's one thing about the ending, the kind of little big kind of what made it personal sort of twist at the end of episode 5 there. But I guess if you follow enough clues that they kind of foreshadowed in the first episode or 2, it kind of makes sense. It feels like it comes out of nowhere, but it's actually explained pretty okay. So I had a good time with that. I find it more telling about Life is Strange Before the Storm that I did not remember that Steph was an already revealed character in that game. I talked about the tabletop RPG. Steph is the one who leads that tabletop RPG in the Before the Storm prequel, where you play as Chloe Price. That means that she's from Arcadia Bay, and I think it's telling that I did not remember that she was already an established character in that universe. But yeah, good time all around. I think when you hear that, how do you make a character have empathy as their superpower? It totally works. It worked out really well. So I'm glad that I played that finally before it. I think it's now off Game Pass. So you had to get it while it was good. And then after that, I started and I'm about like 2/3 of the way through the game I'm talking about next week. So more on that next week.
Woo!
In the meantime, we've got a couple composer follow-up news headlines to talk about as things happen in the video game industry. I like to tie it back to the composers that we've talked about on the show or the games we've talked about. And let's start with another candidate for one of the better game trailers of all time. It is finally the story trailer, official trailer number 3 for The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. We are less than 1 month away from release for that game, and beyond what are the new gameplay mechanics, we didn't know too much about like what's the central conflict, who are some of the big key players in that. And basically they decided to edit the trailer almost like it was the 2017 Switch presentation trailer for Breath of the Wild, almost to a T. It's different beats and slow builds and all that. It's a terrific trailer. I don't think it is as good as the Breath of the Wild trailer. I think that is an all-timer. But this was still excellent. Nice to hear a stellar music track that I'm sure will also be broken out in its official soundtrack release, like the 2017 trailer was for Breath of the Wild. Saxophone!
In a Zelda game.
Saxophone. Love it. Love hearing that and the build to what is like the main motif there. We don't know any confirmation yet on who the composers are on that game. It could be Monika Kataoka again. It could be Yasuaki Iwata helping her again, like we talked about in episode 95 of Original Soundchat for our Breath of the Wild episode. But you know what? That's going to be one heck of a game, and it's nice to see Nintendo deliver that trailer for the game to get the hype up, finally.
Very much so. I've also enjoyed all of the memes coming out of it, which my favorite is currently a tweet that was captured with my phone when it sees a QR code, and it's just Zelda sitting on the thing saying, Link! And that's the whole video. It's great. Yeah, I'm very much looking forward to Zelda. I think that is probably the last big release I'm currently looking forward to this year. Obviously, we're only halfway through the year. I can't play Final Fantasy 16 when it comes out because I don't have a PlayStation 5, but I'll be interested to see how it turns out. And speaking of Final Fantasy 16, there was a state of play, and they showed a bunch of gameplay. Of course, that game has music being done by Masayoshi Soken. We talked about him back in episode 72. He is the lead composer for Final Fantasy XIV, all of it. So we've talked about 2 of his big soundtracks, and I'm really excited to hear that soundtrack. I didn't catch any of the gameplay yet.
It sure seems like an open world game. It's definitely, real-time action. It's almost like Kingdom Hearts 3 in that sort of way. Like, no real underpinnings of turn-basedness like there was, in a way, for Final Fantasy 15. It looks awesome. We know that the combat is done by the Devil May Cry 5, combat designers. So it's a lot of underpinnings there, I would say, if anything. And the action looks awesome. They spent minutes on showing the icon versus icon fights, and that really let Soken's music shine. And that is going to be up there. I don't think it's going to be, clear cut this year for best soundtrack in 2023, but it's going to be up there for Final Fantasy 16 because, oh boy, so far some gems so far there. I did like, though, that it seems like as you identify different side quests and things like that on the map, it looked like you could fast travel to those character points. And I like that a lot. I mean, that was the sense I got from some of the gameplay. They didn't say it explicitly, but that'd be neat. I'm looking forward to that one later in June.
One day I'll be able to play it. Unfortunately, the PS5 that is in my apartment is not mine. And while I could convince my roommate to let me borrow it for, say, the 12 hours of Resident Evil 4, Final Fantasy 16 would be a different story.
Yeah, probably a beefier game on that one.
Anyways, let's get into the first of our 2 games this week. This one from me being Advance Wars, which is, again, as I stated last week, a game I have never played. Just like the next, I think, 3 games still. Which has really been kind of interesting, but also really hard for this one in particular. Because Wikipedia is really bad at describing gameplay, and watching gameplay does not really bring across what's actually happening. But I tried my best. Advance Wars, originally released for the Game Boy Advance in North America on September 10th, 2001.
Oh!
Yeah, we'll get to that. Europe would get the game on January 11th, 2002, and then, this I did not know, it would not see a release in Japan at all. Until it was re-released alongside its 2003 sequel in the form of Game Boy Wars Advance 1+2 in 2004. So neither this game or its sequel was ever released separately in Japan, and they wouldn't come out until about 3 years later. Interesting. The way that you're going to want to play it now, well, not now, but this Friday, because it's releasing on this Friday, April 21st, the game's been completely remade, and its sequel as well, as part of Advance Wars 1+2 Reboot Camp, releasing for the Nintendo Switch, and that's why we're talking about it. So, Advance Wars was developed by Intelligent Systems, and it was published by Nintendo, and it is actually the 7th game in what is officially known as the Wars series, which began in 1988 with the Japan-only Famicom Wars, of course, for the Famicom. From there was Game Boy Wars Turbo, Super Famicom Wars, Game Boy Wars 2, and Game Boy Wars 3. You can probably guess what systems those were all made for. All of those were only ever released in Japan. Though, funnily enough, not only did Advance Wars only release in North America and Europe initially, and was the first of the games to come over to the West, it didn't come out in Japan. Like, that's really funny. I don't know why. The first one we get, and we get it first, and then Japan doesn't get it at all.
I don't know if it had something to do with, like, was it the strength of the Game Boy Advance in Japan at the time? Was it something to do with the platform? Like, that's puzzling. I don't know.
There is actually a specific reason, and it is that Game Boy Wars 3 was coming out the same year, and they didn't want it to compete.
Oh, okay.
Which is the dumbest reason, but that's why.
I mean, at least they made up for it with the sequel package.
Yeah. So, what is Advance Wars? It is a turn-based strategy game where battles can take place between 2 to 4 armies, and each army has its own commanding officer, or CO as they are referred to. Maps work very similarly to Fire Emblem. They're grid-ish based. I don't think they're like strictly grid-based as far as I can tell, but it's difficult to tell again. Every army takes a turn to move all of their units, or they can build new ones, with different types of terrain affecting units in different ways. They can give them an advantage, make them harder to hit, make them unable to move as much on the next turn, etc., etc. Pretty much exactly like Fire Emblem. But unlike Fire Emblem, units are actually like squads of an army rather than singular unique characters, and they come in a variety of forms. There's infantry, vehicles, ships, or air units, with subtypes in each one. So like, ships have boats or, submarines and stuff like that. Some types of units are better utilized by certain COs than others. And also, vehicles need to worry about fuel. They use up a certain amount each turn and must be resupplied to stay in use. Ground vehicles just sort of stop moving if they run out of fuel. Air and sea vehicles use up fuel whether you move them or not every turn, and if they run out, they die. Because, one of them's in the air. Only certain types of units can attack other certain types of units. So, like, specifically, from what I can tell, like, you can't send an infantry squad against a tank That's not gonna work. But the amount of damage that a unit does is directly tied to multiple factors, such as how much health the unit has left. The health signifies how much of that unit is left, essentially. If they have the ability to fire their main weapon, some units have secondary weapons that can allow them to attack 2 types of enemies, and what type of enemy they are attacking, as well as the terrain that their targets are currently sitting on. COs also have a power meter that builds up as you defeat enemy units and are able to activate a special ability once it is full. This will either give an advantage to your army or a disadvantage to the enemy, sometimes both. An example that is given on Wikipedia is that the CO Olaf's ability is to make it snow, which limits the enemy's range and increases his own. So to win a battle in Advance Wars, you must either destroy every enemy unit on the map or capture the opponent's headquarters, though some maps in the campaign mode do have level-specific objectives as well. And you can also play the game multiplayer, either by doing the link cable, which is how you picture multiplayer on a GBA, or by passing one GBA around.
The schoolyard easy method.
Which is like a built-in mode. They made it for that, so it works, I guess, if it's turn-based. The story of Advance Wars, as it is a game I have not played, I grabbed the first bit off Wikipedia, so let's go ahead and let it explain the story better than I would. Quote, the story of Advance Wars begins in the field training tutorial mode with the nation of Orange Star and a war against the neighboring nation of Blue Moon, with Olaf as the Blue Moon Army commanding officer. Olaf suddenly ordered an invasion of the Orange Star Nation and is in battle with the Orange Star Army. The campaign continues the story that started in the tutorial. Nell, the de facto leader of the Orange Star COs, gives the player the duty of a tactical advisor for the Orange Star Army. So basically you play as the strategist, and you can play alongside different COs with different abilities. From what I can tell in the campaign, you start with one CO unlocked, and it's not Andy, who is the only one I know. But you eventually unlock more as you go, and you also unlock those characters for multiplayer mode. So it's that's Advance Wars. So here's where I will ask, Peter, what are your experiences with Advance Wars?
Well, the idea of someone named Olaf ordering the invasion of another nation sure puts the events of this last year and some hesitance on Nintendo's part into some perspective. I have not played Advanced Wars. I'm familiar with the title and how similar it is to the turn-based, grid-based RPGs that would follow it, especially on Nintendo's side, but for a long time that's not been a genre that I've particularly cared about. So I've seen friends play Advance Wars and enjoy it and heard good things about it, but I have zero experience with the franchise and also zero experience with its music, so looking forward to learning today.
I also have zero experience with this franchise. I've never touched an Advance Wars game. I have meant to for years because it's one of those GBA games where people go on and on about how it's incredible and how it's one of the best games on the platform. I've never gotten around to it. Maybe, well, I guess it probably won't show up on NSO, if they're re-releasing it right now.
Not right now, but maybe sometime soon.
Maybe. I don't know if I'm going to buy Reboot Camp, at least not at launch. I might buy it eventually, but it is not. Zelda comes out in a month. It's not really on my priority list.
Right.
But I did want to talk about it because it is a very popular game that a lot of people really love, and it made sense to talk about it this week. So, of all the places for Advance Wars to be first announced, it was by French gaming sites. Specifically because Nintendo France just gave a bunch of screenshots to a bunch of French gaming sites. So they were the first to ever see and reveal the game in any form whatsoever. That is weird. But hey, good for Nintendo France, I guess. Originally, the game had begun development within Nintendo itself as a GBA launch title, but the company wound up being so busy preparing for, the GBA's launch that they then approached Intelligent Systems to develop it instead. And according to people within Intelligent Systems, during early development, they would continually approach Nintendo with ideas for unique mechanics, and Nintendo would turn them down, being told they were, quote, too sophisticated. The target audience, you see, was children, which is why Nintendo was worried about that. And that's also why the art is very colorful, and the writing has more of a comedic slant to it. But despite this, apparently Nintendo has noted that a majority of the purchasers happen to be teenage boys. So the marketing towards kids sort of worked, I guess, but not enough to keep non-kids away. I don't know.
Well, it's the whole thing where if you appeal to teenage boys as well, it's going to help, sell to younger kids as well, because that's what's cool. I mean, there's the trade-off there.
Yeah. A quote that I think was very, very interesting about the development. This is from Wikipedia, quote, Director Makoto Shimojo discussed how various developers introduced elements from their favorite genres into the game. He gave examples, which included a developer who was a fan of shooters, designing the movement system to work in a way that allows players to control their units down to the perfect centimeter, as well as a developer who was a fan of rhythm games, adding a rhythm to how the units move. So I think that is really cool for them to take stuff from genres they really like and put them in a game you wouldn't necessarily expect those aspects to show up in. Like, that's really, really neat to know. As you might have noticed by the reaction when I said it, Advance Wars had a bit of an unfortunate release date in North America, being September 10th, 2001. The very next day, not known to be a great day for anyone, the next day would be the attacks on the two towers, the World Trade Center in New York City, as well as the Pentagon. And this is the main reason why the game's release was delayed in Europe. And I saw suggestions that it also had to do with the Japanese release essentially being dropped altogether. But again, Nintendo claims it's so it didn't compete with Game Boy Wars 3.
But honestly, it could be a bit of both. Who knows?
Yeah, probably. And this is unfortunately not the last time this type of thing would happen to this specific game, as the upcoming re-release for Switch, Reboot Camp, was originally planned to come out on April 8th, 2022, but it was delayed indefinitely following the Russian invasion of Ukraine. So if something bad happens this week, it's because Advance Wars is cursed. And it can't come out in America without something bad happening right next to it. I guess. But when it did come out, despite all that, Advance Wars reviewed incredibly well upon release. It has a Metacritic score of 92. It is often highly regarded as one of the best titles on the Game Boy Advance, which is saying something because the Game Boy Advance's library is huge and there is a lot of bangers on that system. And as stated before, this is the first Wars game to be released outside of Japan, and according to the people who worked on it, this really had a major impact on Nintendo, because Nintendo, they really hadn't planned to bring the game to the West, because they just sort of assumed, they had the idea that Western players didn't really care about turn-based games, much less turn-based strategy games. This is pretty much the same reason why Fire Emblem just never left Japan. They figured Westerners wouldn't care. And when Nintendo of America's marketing division got to play a bit of Advance Wars, they found it really fun. They really liked it. And it immediately led to them asking, so, why can't we sell this here? Which did eventually convince the company to take it westward. And I mentioned Fire Emblem for a reason, because when Advance Wars did come to the US, it was a hit, and this is largely considered by many, both within Nintendo and Intelligent Systems, to be the final tipping point in convincing Nintendo to localize and release Fire Emblem The Blazing Blade outside of Japan. Both Fire Emblem The Blazing Blade and Advance Wars had the same lead designer, and he wholeheartedly believes that if Advance Wars hadn't come out here, Fire Emblem never would have either. So he believes that Fire Emblem owes its Western success to Advance Wars entirely. I personally think it's Advance Wars and probably a little bit of Melee, but who am I to argue with the people that made the games? So there have been 5 more Wars game releases since Advance Wars. There's Advance Wars 2, Black Hole Rising for the GBA in 2003. 2005 saw the release of both Advance Wars Dual Strike for the Nintendo DS and Battalion Wars for the GameCube. Battalion Wars 2 released for the Wii in 2007, and Advance Wars Days of Ruin released for the Nintendo DS in 2008. That is the last new entry the series has gotten. And again, Advance Wars 1+2 Reboot Camp, a full remake of both GBA games developed by WayForward, releases this Friday, April 21st, for the Nintendo Switch. So if you're interested in trying it out, that's where you want to go.
Switch Wars would be a fun name.
It would. Hint, hint, Nintendo. So the composer for Advance Wars is a man by the name of Taishi Senda, and that is all the information I have for you about him. There's nothing. There's nothing. Nobody even knows where he works now, because he appears to have left Intelligent Systems sometime after 2003. We think we might know where he is, which brings me to his discography. In terms of games at Intelligent Systems, he is credited for work on Paper Mario, Pokemon Puzzle Challenge, Advance Wars 2 Black Hole Rising, and Pokemon Channel.
Oh, yeah.
And then after, specifically one thing, the Meowth thing in Pokemon Channel, from what I could tell, according to Moby Games. And from there, he appears to have largely left the games industry. His most recent credits are writing for the virtual idol group B Project in 2017, and then writing music for the live action, that's weird to say, idol group High Superb in 2020, or at least we think it's the same person. It's a person by the name of Taishi Senda, and VGMDB treats them as the same person. So it could be. We are not 100% certain from what I can tell. This man is a mysterious figure in the midst of internet research, and I found nothing about him, and seemingly nobody else did either. And there's also no information on this game's soundtrack at all. Probably because the man who composed it is a ghost. Who exists in the other real fourth dimension or whatever. I don't know. But it's a pretty good soundtrack. Though, get ready for some GBA sound fonts. It's been a little while since we talked about one of those, I feel like. But it's all, pretty much the entire thing is CO themes, which from what I can tell, play during their turn, essentially. And every CO has their own theme. And we're going to start with the first one being Nell's theme. Now, I feel like I've heard this song before. I feel like this is the song people point to when talking about this game's soundtrack as, like, the iconic song. Because this sounds very, very familiar. It's got, like, an interesting sort of twang to it. In the... what I assume is supposed to be... is it supposed to be, like, a sax? There's a guitar in there too, but like, is it a guitar? I can't tell. GBA sound font's hard to read. But like, it's got this good energy to it, this cheerful, cartoony, sort of like Kid War.
It feels peppy and positive. It's definitely saxy. And yeah, once that guitar instrument hits, it's like, oh, that sure is an attempt at electric guitar on Game Boy Advance. The system that would shine for trumpet. It's neat to hear other instruments be attempted, but yeah, it sure is a GBA.
Yeah. Like I said, I think, if I remember correctly, Nell is the first CO that you have unlocked in the first place. So, in a way, this could kind of be considered the Advance Wars theme. It's not, but whatever.
It gives the impression of like a training stage. So yeah, if she's the first, like maybe this is kind of also like learning the game. Okay, looking her up, she's like the purple suited woman with like long orangish hair, and she's got the little cap on. Okay, all right.
I've seen this character.
Yeah, seeing some of the remake trailers, like okay, that character looks familiar. That's Nell. Okay, or Catherine in Japanese. Okay,
interesting. Why would we rename that? Catherine's a name we use here. Sure. The next one, critical check number 2, another character theme. This is Sammy's theme. So this one has roughly like the same sort of energy to it, the same sort of tone, but this one has a lot more of a rough and tumble feel to it. Which fits, because if you look at the character of Sammy, yeah, this sort of tomboyish tone to it, and this heavy sort of strumming guitar fits what this character looks like. Personality-wise, I could not tell you. But apparently she specializes in mechs, which is cool, and also I can sort of feel that in this song, if that makes sense. This is a really good theme. I think this is probably my favorite theme of the ones that stood out to me when I was putting this Triddle 5 together.
Yeah, for being one of the 3 characters on the box art, it's probably a good way to include her. Yeah, looking at the character design, totally matches. I think you're right. Rough and tumble is a good way to describe the music. Also, just having a ball learning about the Japanese names for the characters on the Advance Wars fandom page. Sammy is known as Domino in the Japanese version.
Huh. That checks out. That, for some reason, feels like it fits very well. Critical check number 3 is somebody from outside the Orange Star Army. This is Grit's theme. Now I'll remind you, the other Blue Moon CO we know, which Grit is a Blue Moon CO. The other one we know is Olaf, a Russian-themed one. And then you have this dude who looks like he's lost a Shaggy lookalike contest, and his music sounds like he stepped out of a saloon.
Yeah, is he supposed to be like American inspired? His name is Billy, by the way.
Beautiful. I mean, at least the name Grit sort of fits the tone this song goes. I didn't look at how any of these characters looked while I was picking these songs out. I briefly looked at them afterwards, but this was pretty much what stands out to me. And this one was like, okay, sure, suddenly we're Western. All right, and you're probably right. He might be supposed to be American, because that would fit the instrumentation and the tone of this song a lot. And also in one of these pictures, he's wearing a cowboy hat, but only in one of them. So I don't know.
Yeah, I could totally hear this like if Red Dead Redemption or Red Dead Redemption 2 were like brought down into like 16-bit, I could hear it being thrown in there. Or you just throw it into the game itself just for a comical take. Yeah, this sure sounds like if we had an American cowboy in the game, how would this sound? That's really interesting. Good mix up on the instrumentation there.
Critical track number 4. This is Kanbei's theme. So Kanbei is a CO from the Yellow Comet army. He's apparently the Emperor of Yellow Comet. He's a samurai dude who looks exactly like you would expect a samurai dude in Advance Wars to look.
You would think Kanbei wouldn't have his name changed, but his name in Japanese is Kikuchiyo.
Oh, that's so weird. Why would they bother changing? You know what? What am I to question? Anyways, this track stood out to me because, again, it's weird that all these Japanese developed systems do Japanese traditional instruments weirdly well on their sound cards.
Yeah, no kidding, right?
I wonder if those two things are connected, but it does. The GBA does really good at traditional Japanese sounding themes. I think these are some of the highest quality MIDIs we've heard so far in the Critical 5. And I don't know, this song just sounds really cool.
Yeah, it totally fits for the samurai Japanese sort of vibe. And you're totally right. Yeah, of course it's designed to make these instruments stand out and sound great. And yeah, totally nailed it with this one.
And the last track on the Critical 5, I believe the final boss's theme, from what I can tell. It is Sturm's theme. So Sturm is a discount Darth Vader looking dude. Orange.
Sure is. Wow.
And he is the leader of Black Hole, which I guess is the final antagonist of the game. And this certainly sounds like the main villain's battle theme, 100%. This is probably my second favorite, right behind Sammy's theme, for my favorite on the Critical 5, because this song is really cool and it's got a really neat, sinister feeling to it. And I don't know, it's just, this is a final boss's hell track and it rules.
Yeah, what do you do when you don't have really the capability to do epic orchestral final boss battle in a kids war game? You do metal, apparently, because that's the next best thing. And okay, GBA doing that pretty well. Again, it sure is electric guitar, I guess, but it captures the vibe really well. Probably for the best also that they changed the name on this one, because in Japanese, Sturm's name is Hellbozu.
That's so much better.
I know, but you can't have hell in kids' games. What about the Western sensibilities?
So we'll just name him Sturm, a real name that real people have.
And we'll just make it seem German that way, okay.
I guess. Yeah, This song's super cool. More than anything, I think this is the one I most look forward to hearing what Reboot Camp does with it. I'm assuming the soundtrack got redone. I would hope.
Yeah, you gotta imagine, right? But that'd be interesting to listen to that when it comes out. Could be an honorable mention this year, honestly.
Potentially. Like, the stuff in this game's really good. I could easily see it hitting honorable mention status. No problem. So, tracks of the cutting room floor. Again, 2 character themes. The first one, I kind of had to include it because he's the only character I knew before any of this. And that is Andy's theme. Andy's a CO for Orange Star. He's one of the first 3 you get, as far as I could tell. Apparently, according to the internet, he's the most well-rounded character of any Advance War game that he appears in. He looks like One Piece should be suing him, because he looks like Luffy.
Yeah.
But he's the only character I know, and I mainly know him because when people talked about an Advance Wars character getting into Smash, it was always Andy. Every time.
Yeah, or like if a spirit showed up or something like that. Yeah, for sure.
So, Andy's just the only one I knew.
And that slap bass is killing it. Boy, oh boy. What a good use. Like, that instrument shines on GBA, and that's nice to hear. Of course, the other instruments come in. It rounds it out and sounds good, but slapping the bass, man. Of course, Andy, a very Americanized name. Not going to be his name. What is the Japanese name? Ryo.
Okay, that's an equivalent. I could see that. 100%. This theme feels main character-ish. And to be fair, until I did this research, I thought Andy was the main character of Advance Wars.
Yeah, same.
So, to find out that he's actually not, and he's just one of, like, 3 people that you start the campaign with, is weird. But yeah, this theme sounds main character. But also it just didn't stand out to me as well as, like, the others that ended up on the Critical 5. But I figured it at least had to be on the cutting room floor 100%. And the other track on the cutting room floor, this is Olaf's theme. This one's only sort of here because I like it. It's mostly here because, as I found out, Olaf is your first opponent in the game. So this is one of the first, like, enemy themes you're going to hear while you play. He looks exactly like I would expect a man named Olaf to look. And his song sounds very similar to what I would expect his theme to sound like, except the jingle bells are a nice touch, considering snow is his theme.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, this man is supposed to be Russian-inspired 100%. You can hear it in the song. It's fine. It's a fine theme, I think. At least for the character it's supposed to be for.
Through and through, Russian 100%. And coming from someone who knew nothing about Advanced Wars, yeah, just even further cements that, like, this added to the sensitivity of global events of the last year. I can totally see that. Even when the fandom page says Olaf is inspired on Joseph Stalin, the leader of the Soviet Union in World War II. So his Japanese name is Whippu. So I don't know. I think maybe Olaf actually works as a better name translated there, but yeah.
Sure, whatever you say, Nintendo.
But yeah, it's the timpani, it's the jingle bells. I think it fits the kind of imagery and nationality that they're going for.
So what will I never forget about Advance Wars? Andy's not the main character, I guess. Oops. I've thought that for over a decade, ever since I knew what Advance Wars was, which actually legitimately might only be because people were asking for Andy and Smash. I don't see how I would have learned about it otherwise, to be perfectly honest. It's got pretty good music for the GBA, I'm not gonna lie. Like, some of those character themes are jams. Again, Sammy's theme and Sturm's theme in particular stand out to me. But for the most part, like, I don't know, I'll probably try it at some point, but it doesn't sound like a game that I would super be into. Like, from what I can tell, the story is kind of light on story. The story is basically, oh, this country attacked this one, so that's wartime, and that's the story, from what I understand. And, like, the reason I like Fire Emblem is because the story goes a little bit further than that, usually. But I'll definitely give it a shot at some point, whether that's through Reboot Camp or through the original GBA game. Remains to be seen, but eventually, maybe.
I'm definitely glad it exists, especially for what it did for Nintendo. And yeah, you're telling me that we get to hear newer versions of these songs soon with the remake. That is really good potential. It's one of those things where it's like really good foundations, but a little betrayed by the quality of the instruments available at the time on the sound card.
Yeah. And also the speakers on the GBA probably did not help.
Yeah, totally.
So for our transition, we like to highlight a fan cover. I found a remix of Sturm's theme from the YouTube channel Deal_Nicholas. And, hey, it's really good. It's referred to as Meteor Strike remix Infern with a 1 instead of the I in Infern. I don't know. Look, I didn't name it, but it's a really, really good remix that honestly makes it a little bit less metalish, but this is kind of close to what I imagine the way forward version might sound like, so I figured it was worth throwing in there. So please enjoy that, and we'll be right back.
It's another Nintendo published game that starts with A, but we fast forward to 2019 for Astral Chain. Astral Chain released on August 30th, 2019 for Nintendo Switch. That's it. Worldwide. No other platform. It is a Switch exclusive and has stayed that way because it is developed by Platinum Games and published by Nintendo. Astral Chain is a third-person action-adventure game with hack-and-slash character action combat, which falls very much in line with a Platinum Games experience. Think Bayonetta. The player is able to summon a tethered familiar known as a Legion, which is bound by a chain that is the game's namesake. Legions come in various different forms, sporting different abilities that are used for both puzzle solving and combat. Success in combat involves learning when to deploy the Legion optimally and using it for combos. Also, don't leave it too exposed to potential damage against enemies, because that will hurt. Outside of occasionally dual-tethered combat, you assume the role of a police detective, and you are tasked with solving cases and investigating incidents that take place in the game's main world. You explore the world, you question non-playable characters, and you examine evidence which yields clues and logic puzzles that become leads, which further the investigation process. During the course of the game, the player will also access the Astral Plane, which is an interdimensional area where they must traverse hazardous terrain, solve puzzles, and battle enemies. It's basically like your traditional video game dungeon space. What is the story of Astral Chain? Well, it's not easy to summarize, but cobble a few different sources together, and we've got this. In 2078, humanity is on the brink of extinction. The population has retreated to the Ark, a bustling megacity atop a man-made island. The world is currently under attack by interdimensional life forms called chimeras, which reside in the astral plane, an alien dimension that is made up entirely of cubed, crystallized data and corruption. The player takes the role of one of two twin police officers who join the Neuron Task Force as new officer recruits. The player-selected sibling has a custom identity. You can be a man or a woman. But then your other twin, your opposite gender sibling, becomes Akira Howard. Shortly after joining the force, Joseph Calvert, Neuron's commander, gives each twin a legion, or submissive chimeras that have been bound to an officer via a psychic chain, for use in combat and for investigation purposes. Unfortunately, after a run-in with the astral plane and an attack on the Aegis Research Institute, the player finds himself as the only one able to control a legion, with the other legions having gone rogue. The twins are then met with another threat, Jenna Anderson, a former Aegis Research Institute top scientist and Yosef's former pupil, who is directing chimera attacks and loathes Union, or the Ark's government. Big questions. What are Jenna's true motivations? Can chimera and rogue legion attacks be stopped? And what else is threatening the very existence of the Ark, and thus humanity itself? So Joe, here's where I'll ask you, what are our experiences with Astral Chain?
I played it the year after it came out. I played it in January of that year. I distinctly remember being on a plane to Mexico, in January 2020, playing Astral Chain. Game's awesome. I don't remember a thing about the plot, except for how it ends, which is a pretty good ending. I'm not gonna lie, all things considered, especially considering the subject matter of the game being the cops forcibly chaining a thing to fight for them. Oops. Overall, it is a really cool game. It is a very well-made action game. I like how the fandom has taken to referring to the astral plane, because it is just a bunch of cubes and stuff. It is referred to as the frame rate dimension, because it's where they can unrender all the scenery, and the frame rate will move at a good pace on the Switch. So that's where every single boss fight takes place, essentially, is the frame rate dimension. One thing that's kind of cool about it, and that I wouldn't have known because I've played very few Platinum games. In fact, I think before this, the one Platinum game I had played was Metal Gear Rising. I don't think I've played any others, because I haven't played any Bayonetta or anything like that. Apparently, this game is a flawless fusion of a bunch of stuff mashed together from previous games that Platinum has worked on. Just a bunch of it. It works incredibly well. Combat feels super cool, even when you're bad at it, like me. And I remember having a good time with Astral Chain.
I own Astral Chain, but I have not played it yet. Honestly, if the middle of this year weren't swamped with game releases, from Star Wars Jedi Survivor to Zelda Tears of the Kingdom to Final Fantasy 16, maybe I play this closer to the end of the year, honestly, because it was really neat to research this, and I knew that the soundtrack was already a banger and a half. It made our top 10 best of 2019 episode. It was number 7 that year. A lot of great music to cover here on the Critical 5 and beyond. But yeah, I do like Platinum games. I've also played Metal Gear Rising. I played a little bit of Bayonetta. And yeah, to have the Switch have this exclusive, especially one that holds up to, Platinum standards so well. Oh, we should also mention Nier Automata. also an important game in the Platinum sort of lineage. And yeah, great to point out that there. Yeah, this seems like a lot of all that combined, especially also on the soundtrack front. So really cool to learn about. It's one of those that it's on my backlog for sure, especially from 2019. And yeah, I have it. Just gotta get to it sometime. Though my Switch has been dying. Like, I'm begging for a new, like a Switch Pro at the end of this year. I don't know how it's going to make it through Zelda. Let's be honest. It is a jet ready for takeoff. It is overheated in the middle of 8, race Mario Kart sessions. It's just not a good scene, and I'm not doing that OLED upgrade when something's hopefully close to the horizon. That launch Switch is just dying on me.
Yeah, mine is also a launch Switch. I'm having similar, well, not the overheating thing, but I feel like my battery dies way faster now than it used to. So
Sure. I mean, but yeah, 6 years. It's had a good run, but let's get something in the hopper there. Nintendo plays some of these games maybe at a better resolution and frame rates. I'd love that. So when it comes to Astral Chain's development, Platinum Games estimated that the game had been in the works for roughly 5 years between its conceptualization and its eventual release. The game was pitched to Nintendo after the company requested the development of a new game with high difficulty, and Platinum sees it as a synergetic action game that is an evolution of their previous action game. So there you go. Absolutely. It takes the best parts of its previous games and puts it all together. Noted when it was revealed Astral Chain was directed by Takahisa Taura, who was the previous lead game designer on Nier Automata. And as you might expect, for Platinum Games, he was under supervision by Devil May Cry and Bayonetta series creator Hideki Kamiya, with character designs from manga artist Masakazu Katsura. Had not heard the name of that mangaka before, but he's worked on Wingman, Shadow Lady, DNA 2, Video Girl I, Aizu, and Zetman. I feel like Video Girl I is the one name that stands out from that.
None of those ring a bell for me at all. Video Girl I sounds the most familiar, but I could not make a picture in my head of what it would look like.
Right, yeah. Mm-hmm. So Astral Chain was initially envisioned as a fantasy game where the player would utilize magic. However, at Nintendo's recommendation, the game was changed to a cyberpunk setting, as they felt it would make for a more unique setting. I think they got that right. So then the setting would be inspired by various anime such as Ghost in the Shell and Appleseed, as well as the works of Masakazu Katsura. So hey, it's a good hire on that one to get the guy.
Also, Ghost in the Shell checks out 100%.
Absolutely. Yeah, I feel like you gotta name check that one if you're talking about a cyberpunk anime. The gameplay of Astral Chain is designed around controlling 2 characters at once, which Taura has said comprises the core of the game itself. He compared it to the way that the Wicked Weave's ability is the core of Bayonetta. The game is also inspired by the 1983 Namco arcade game Libble Rabble. The story was derived from this gameplay mechanic, and while the ability to play as a male or female character was always intended as an option, the game initially did not feature twin protagonists in the project's early stages. It was actually Katsura's sketches of constantly seeing the 2 characters together that ended up inspiring this. The game ultimately reviewed very well, with a Metacritic average of 87. Critics praised its dual character gameplay, the world building, the presentation, the customization, and the soundtrack, though it received some criticism for its usage of a silent protagonist and some inconsistent or repetitive visual design. Sold pretty well, though, honestly. It sold 1.28 million units as of the end of 2021, and that outperformed expectations by Platinum. If you want to know right now, it is currently the 61st best-selling game on Nintendo Switch, so that tells you something about the install base there, and you almost got to hit 1 million at this point if you want your game to be successful.
I mean, still, that's really good for a platinum game. Like you said, outperforming expectations. I feel like a lot of people don't know this. Platinum games don't sell very well.
Yeah, I think they're definitely catered to a certain audience, and it's not a big one at that. 2019, an interesting year for Game Awards. Astral Chain didn't stand out too much, though, honestly. It was nominated for Best Action Game at the Game Awards. It was nominated for Most Promising New Intellectual Property, Excellence in Design, and Excellence in Gameplay at the South by Southwest Gaming Awards. And it was nominated 10 times at the Navigator Awards, where it won Original Light Mix Score, New IP. All the categories there for the Navigator Awards. What has been the legacy of Astral Chain? No sequel in the works. It's been pretty recently, since 2019. Though the ARC Police Force dog mascot, Lappy, was teased significantly when Bayonetta 3 had its gameplay reveal trailer, or essentially the re-reveal of Bayonetta 3.
The announcement that a game did in fact exist.
Besides just a logo. Certainly a good misdirect. Even when I was watching that, I'm like, it feels like Bayonetta, but this is that Astral Chain dog. But honestly, that's really been the only Astral Chain news since the game launched. Nintendo owns the IP, so it sounds like it's going to be their decision if they ever let Platinum make a sequel or even let Astral Chain come to other platforms.
Part of me is still kind of shocked that there's no Astral Chain in Smash.
Right? Yeah.
I thought that was a lock, personally. Obviously, I was wrong. Obviously, the character I thought was a lock wasn't in, and the character I thought would never be in was. So that goes to show how much people should listen to me when it comes to Smash speculation. But, like, I figured that Sakurai would see Astral Chain and be like, hey, that could be a really cool character. I'm going to use that. And then he didn't, and that's weird to me, because I think they would have been really cool. But I don't think we'll see it come to other platforms, simply because, like, this one is 100% Nintendo owns this IP, though Wonderful 101. Granted, Wonderful 101 sold like 20 copies in general, so probably not going to go that way.
Yeah, I feel like we're in Bayonetta territory now, though, and it's going to have to take something pretty extreme. But yeah, who knows if there's ever another Smash game, but that could put, I don't want to say Akira Howard, because that's your twin. The Astral Chain protagonist, the silent protagonist, let's say, could have some potential as a Smash fighter. I think you're right there.
I've been referring to them as Officer Howard, but I don't know how else you'd refer to them, honestly.
No, that's fair. I think we can work with that. So the composer that we will talk about for Astral Chain's music is Satoshi Igarashi. And Satoshi Igarashi was born on August 14th, 1990 in Odawara, Kanagawa Prefecture, Japan. He is not the only Satoshi Igarashi that was born in 1990, according to VGMDB.net. The other is a mixing and recording engineer who has worked on a lot of anime, Nier Automata, oddly enough, and also Xenoblade Chronicles 2. But this Satoshi Igarashi, the composer, has also gone by the aliases Muryoku P and Powerless. He was a composer at Platinum Games from 2013 to 2019, so seemingly Astral Chain was his last project there, and he's now at the company Tokyo Logic. You can follow him on Twitter at Muryoku P. That's MURYOKUP. His discography, he got his start at Platinum Games working on the soundtrack for Bayonetta 2, and then Astral Chain was his first game as lead composer. He's also contributed some music to Gran Turismo Sport and Gran Turismo 7 under the Powerless alias. And it was really neat to learn about the historical development research for the soundtrack to Astral Chain, because Platinum did a lot of dev blogs on the project, and Igarashi got to present a couple specifically about the game's vocal tracks and also about composing the score. So a lot of neat information here, actually. The music was primarily composed by Satoshi Igarashi, with some help by Naofumi Harada, who we talked about his work on episode 196 for Bayonetta 2, and also Hitomi Kurokawa. Additional composition was presented by Masahiro Godspeed Aoki. Talked about Masahiro Aoki on episode 27 for his work on Street Fighter V, and also Satoshi Setsune, and both of them worked on cutscene music. Then Hiroyuki Fujino, Kei Shimojo, and Miki Fujisue, they composed the different vocal songs for the game. And Nintendo proposed to Platinum Games with the idea of partnering with Avex Group to acquire vocalists for the game's theme songs. And so you got William Aoyama, he's from the Japanese pop group Intersection, and Beverly, who performed the theme song for the 2019 anime adaptation of Fruits Basket.
Oh.
And so William Aoyama and Beverly were picked by Igarashi and Taura to perform vocals on 3 separate theme songs. And the decision of hiring 2 vocalists, a male and a female, was, of course, made to represent the game's dual protagonists. Igarashi notes how the game's score is made up of elements from 3 genres. There's metal, electronic, and orchestral music. And so envision a graph with the 2 axes in your mind. So think that the y-axis starts at the bottom from calm and goes up the y-axis to tense. Then the x-axis goes from the start with cool and then expands to dramatic. So electronic music, according to Igarashi, is for calm and cool. It kind of goes in the bottom left of the square, if you will. Metal is cool and tense, so it goes in the upper left of the square. And then orchestral can either be dramatic and calm or dramatic and tense, so it goes in the upper right and the lower right of that square. And so he kind of has this graphic kind of drawn out in his dev blog, and he notes how, depending on the type of moment in the story or the game, whether it's a situation, a stage, cutscene, normal battle, mid-boss battle, boss battle, or event battle, you can place it on the graph and then kind of determine what genre the song should be, what instruments are used, etc. Since Igarashi also worked on music implementation, he said he worked hard to make sure that the background music escalates seamlessly as you progress through the story, the boss fights become even more dramatic and high impact as they go on, and that the music transitions smoothly as the game goes from playable to cutscene. There was a soundtrack released, but it was only released with the Japanese and European collector's editions of the game. So, didn't get it here in the States. As we've seen with Nintendo published games, big issues also getting it streamed anywhere on platforms. So I guess let's highlight the music for Astral Chain, and we'll do that with the 5 critical tracks for the game. And we have to start with this one. Kind of makes sense to start here. This is Savior. This song is composed by Hiroyuki Fujino, with vocals by William Aoyama and Beverly to represent both Officer Howards. And this plays during the opening sequence that not only sounds like, but plays out visually much like an anime OP.
Boy, does it!
An anime title opening sequence, and it sure looks that way, as cheesy as it comes. It was specifically requested to be this way by the game director Takahisa Taura. And Igarashi said that his main goals with the vocal themes in general, they needed to rock as hard as the instrumental score, to feature duets between the male and female vocalists, and to have strong anime vibes, especially the opening theme. And yeah, boy, does this one. It's catchy. It has that really energetic energy right from the beginning of the piece, not here in the clip, but has a like this guitar lick that kind of gets you right into the electronic drum beat that really peps up the energy. And yeah, it's just a really fun song in general that will stick in your head once you've heard it. But yeah, watching, I saw the opening, I'm like, that sure is an OP for better or for worse.
This song rules, and that OP rules. It's so dumb, but I love that this song is actually like... I don't watch a lot of like recent anime anymore. I had a phase where I did for a while. This is what they sound like. This is what they all sound like.
Yes.
Every shonen anime. But this song is like legitimately absolutely fantastic. I think the auto-tune might be a little much, but that's just me.
Yeah, and I feel like that's a common thread throughout William Aoyama's performance. Maybe that's something that goes with his pop group, that's like people, how people know what he sounds like. But yeah, there's a lot of auto-tuning there. Beverly kills it. I think she sounds spectacular. But yeah, I think we'll note that difference as we get to other tracks here in the Critical 5. But as we continue on, we get to a stage theme, and what better stage theme to get to have that cool and calm mix. Number 2 on the Critical 5 here for Astral Chain is Task Force Neuron. This is composed by Satoshi Igarashi. It's one of the tracks he specifically notes in his dev blog because Task Force Neuron is the background music for the police station where the Neuron officers go about their day-to-day work. It is a stage theme, so it's that electronic music, the mix of cool and calm, and you definitely hear that in all of the different instruments that are present. That bass, you get some nice vocals in there, just to kind of have a little bit of an ethereal nature to it in a way. But Igarashi specifically notes that this is where the officers have a break from the chaos of the Chimera attacks in their day-to-day. So you don't want any extra energy. It's just, you just want a nice, calm piece. But he doesn't want the piece to be, so bland and forgettable. And so he really put a banger together. And yeah, this is one that definitely jumped off the soundtrack as, okay, I can vibe with this for sure. Again, maybe it's a little touchy to say, oh, a police station sounds this good in the politicized world today. But you know what? In the world of the ARC in 2078 and what police have to do in this day and age, yeah, maybe they do need a cool place to chill out.
Yeah, and it's good that you dig the vibe in this song because you're going to hear it a lot. This is the hub. You go there between every single mission. And you spend a good amount of time there too, because that's where you can talk to all the NPCs and you can do a bunch of like errands for them and turn in side quests and stuff like that. So yeah, you hear this song a lot. I remember hearing this song clearly. And yeah, it's good. I don't remember ever getting tired of it at the very least. So there's that. It works well for what it's trying to be.
Yeah, I think you did a really good job with that, trying to balance all those elements there. But we pick it up to a boss battle. How do you add other elements from electronic and boosting it up? Let's get to number 3 on the Critical 5 tracks, and this is Legion Assault. I think when I was listening to the soundtrack, to hear this song is kind of when my ears perked up. I'm like, oh no, this music is actually sick for a boss battle theme. Comments on YouTube seem to especially note this as a boss battle track against Arrow Nemesis, which, yeah, that's actually sounds like a pretty notable moment in the story, considering who the Arrow Legion belonged to. So yeah, that's a really neat piece to stand out. The choir chanting is super reminiscent of Nier Automata. Not the last time comps to that will be made, but it just sounds so good to have like the metal added in here to really amp up the intensity for this boss battle. Igarashi added tips on how he made a song sound more rock. He noted, I down-tuned my guitar to around low G to make it nice and heavy, and used a lot of geometrical phases for a metal sound. The drums had to stay tight. They couldn't have too much of an obviously human element. Drum phrasings are strict and somewhat mechanical. And he also mixed in plenty of synthesizer and drum machine sounds too. And yeah, that checks out for everything. You definitely hear the low string of that guitar kind of rocking, and definitely what's a drop tuning there. But yeah, all the elements are here, and for a boss battle with not the highest stakes, but just some good rock in there. Yeah, this definitely perks the ears up for the Astral Chain soundtrack.
Yeah, the song is awesome. And it's about what I remember boss themes in the game sounding like. It took a little bit of thinking and reminding to remember who the Arrow Legion belonged to for a while. But yeah, I remember now. I do remember this being a very, very cool boss fight. Not the most memorable boss fight, in my opinion. We'll get to that in a bit. But yeah, it's very, very near 100% because of the vocals, which Nier's just become the home for vocals in battle tracks now. That's just what it is now.
It's pretty inescapable, and it continues into the next piece. Number 4 on the Critical 5 tracks for Astral Chain. This is Jenna Anderson. Or, as Satoshi Igarashi notes in his dev blog, this is the redacted boss battle. Did not want to give the title for spoilers' sake, but it is the first phase of the boss battle against Jenna Anderson. Igarashi notes that this is an event battle in his eyes because it is high in stakes and it's big for the story. It's a turning point in the story. He says, according to our chart then, it should be a fully orchestral piece, right? But it isn't. There's 2 reasons for that. 1, the size of the enemy involved. Though the impact this fight has on the story is enormous, the boss in question is not. Also, for all its importance, this is not the most climactic moment in the game. If we pull out all the stops here, where can we go when the stakes get even higher? And I feel like that's why you still hear a lot of metal in this one. A lot of guitars kind of just grinding on this one. I love in the clip the build up to that C minor chord hit. It is so satisfying with the choir and all that. Again, more Nier Automata vibes. And again, like this is like seemingly the start of the boss battle. Like there are a couple more Jenna Anderson tracks after this, but I feel like this is the one that like really takes a liking to your ears. And I really jumped out as me. I was like, yeah, this is gold right here.
I don't remember how this fight goes at all. I'm trying so hard to remember.
But it has such big story ramifications.
I remember Jenna Anderson. I remember her thing. I don't remember this fight at all. So there's that, I guess. This song is rad. It's probably my second favorite song on this Critical 5. But it can't be my favorite because my favorite's coming up. But yeah, no, it has like really good energy to it, and I don't remember what the rest of the fight sounds like or looks like. I don't know. I don't remember.
Maybe it just ramps up a little bit more, so maybe this is like the more metal of all the tracks. But yeah, man, it sounds so good, and it kind of just gives the sense of regular boss battle versus more of an event battle. But like you, critical track number 5 is my favorite on the soundtrack, and it is one of the 3 vocal themes. So we round things out on the critical 5 with Dark Hero female version.
This could be the end of life. This could be the end of us. Just as I was about to give up, something deep inside, giving me all life, using it to the unknown, losing my own control. I was sacrificed for us to survive. Every drop of my blood letting go of my insanity from within.
I mean, are you kidding me with that drop into the chorus? Amazing. I can only imagine how good this sounds in game with all the action going. Just remarkable. It's probably going to be the main reason why when I pick an Officer Howard, it'll probably be the female version, because nothing against William Aoyama. The male version, not as good of a key. I don't think it's as hype. Beverly kills it on this one. Kei Shimojo composed the piece, and wow, it is so good. It is noted as the featured song for the game, so it must come at a huge critical moment. I tried not to go too deep into the spoiler rabbit hole, though I picked up a couple things. So I'm guessing this is a pretty pivotal boss fight. Joe, I don't know if you have any insight into this one.
Yeah, let me put it this way. I do remember this one.
Well, there you go.
This is a really, really good boss fight and a very, very cool moment of the game. And this song absolutely rules. It's the best song in the game. Specifically, this version is the best song in the game. This whole section of the game kicks ass. It's awesome. It's so cool. It's like, it is a fight that I think makes it worth playing the whole damn game in general. So there's that.
Okay, and if the song delivers, I can only imagine it with its proper context. You talk about all the time of how usually that only helps to amplify the mood and everything around it. Couple tracks on the cutting room floor. I have 2. What does a normal combat theme sound like? Well, let's get to this here. This one here is Arc Mall Combat Phase. Oh, you're telling me the standard combat music, specifically for the Arc Mall section of the game, you're telling me that the regular combat music rules? Okay, Satoshi Igarashi, I see you. Specifically, he notes this version in his dev blog, noting the difference between the normal stage theme, the calm and cool version for Arc Mall, and then how the combat phase transitions and amps up, really bringing in the metal elements here. Again, you're hearing the electric guitars, the metal sound, and again, that drop G tuning on that low string. But it really keeps the similar melodies, and you can definitely see like the transition on when you're going from regular, exploration to combat, and just, again, the seamless transition there, just so good. And yeah, if combat sounds like this normally, sign me up. My goodness.
Yeah, I don't remember anything about the Arc Mall. I don't remember. I assume it's a mall. That seems kind of easy. A lot of the regular areas I don't super remember of this game. And I don't fully remember this song and where it plays, but it is really good. And yeah, most of the regular combat music sounds like this. It's really good.
To wrap things up though, on the cutting room floor, we have to include the final vocal theme. And we've got the opening, so you can expect that this is the end credits theme. This is The Answer.
You gotta keep a promise, don't be afraid. Never turn back. Everything you sacrifice. Let your bomb up in the sky. Don't be afraid. Never look back. Never gonna stop. You will always be my heart. There will never be but I believe.
This track is composed by Miki Fujisue, and with vocals once again by William Aoyama and Beverly. Although one of the two is really nailing those high-pitched notes. My goodness! Yeah, it is the end credits theme, and I had to mention the third vocal track. It was a big emphasis on making sure the dual protagonists are represented vocally and making sure that carries over into this theme. I just think it's the weakest of the three, and it's fine. It kind of keeps the same sound going for sure, and it sounds good, but I just feel like Savior and Dark Hero are much more notable in that sense.
Am I wrong to think this sounds very early 2000s?
Yeah, right. Yes.
This sounds like the credits theme for a movie that was made in the early 2000s.
Minority Report.
I don't know. The song is fine. It's fine. But yeah, I agree. The other two vocal themes are way, way better. So,
what will I never forget about this game? I think ever since we brought it up on Best of 2019, I'm like, yeah, make a note. This soundtrack is a banger. I've got to play Astral Chain. So I bought it. I think I bought it used. And it's just sat there in the backlog. But you know what? Learning more about it and how Satoshi Igarashi made such a conscientious effort to how to place the different moments on his graph. It's going to really get me thinking and paying attention when I eventually play this game, hopefully later this year.
I remember that one boss fight. It's a cool boss fight. And I remember the dog and the character in the dog, who I believe is voiced by Cassandra Lee Morris, because that was that period where she's just in every video game, I guess.
Good for her. Love that for her.
She's in all of them.
Everything is Morgana.
I believe I had just finished watching rewatching Toradora right afterwards, which she also voices one of the main characters in the dub. I was hearing a lot of Cassandra Lee Morris for a little bit, but yeah, the dog Lappy is a lot of fun. A lot of the very, very eccentric members of the Neuron Task Force, which, oh my god, I just realized why it's called Neuron. It's a reference to Nerve. Damn it. Mm-hmm. It's an Ava reference. Everything has to be an Ava reference in this damn world. Damn it. It's very anime. It's incredibly anime. But it leans into that anime, and it doesn't shy away from it at all, and I think it does a great job with that tone. It is an action shonen anime through and through, and it is proud to be that. And I think I really dig that. I do think it is probably one of the better games on Switch.
Wow. Yeah. Take that for what it's worth. Go check out Astral Chain and go check out Advance Wars 1+2 Reboot Camp coming out this week on Switch, because they're both Nintendo published games with the letter A. And that will do it for us. That's it for this week on Original Soundchat. You can find me on Twitter at Pete Speakeasy. Joe is over at String Pixel. The video version of the show is on the Rhymes with Asia YouTube channel, but it's that MP3 podcast version that you want, and that's hosted by Anonymous Dinosaur at anondino.squarespace.com. That's where Joe's other podcast, Smasherpieces, is hosted. And you can find Smasherpieces and Original Soundchat wherever you get your podcasts, on catchers all around the globe. Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, even on Spotify. We have a feed of podcast episodes, but we also have a playlist of video game music. If we talk about a video game music track on the show and it's on Spotify, it gets added to this big, huge playlist on Spotify. Joe, anything added this week?
These are both first-party Nintendo games. No.
Nope. Sorry. But when you're done listening, you can find the show on social media at Soundchat OST. Leave some feedback for us. How are we doing with these episodes? Did we miss anything that should have been on the Critical 5 or Cutting Room Floor? And give us some suggestions for games to cover in the future. All right, Joe, who are we talking about next week?
I am genuinely scared of talking about this game after seeing how big the soundtrack is, but I will be talking about Chris Nordgren.
For me, I'll again be talking about the game I'm playing through right now, and that is composed by Gordy Hobb. All right, to play us out, I'd like to highlight a fan cover, a fan remix, whether it's on YouTube, OC Remix, wherever. On YouTube, you gotta find a version of Dark Hero, but there's a lot of the male version. And so we'll show you kind of what it sounds like, what key it's in, maybe why we think the female hero version is better. And so this Dark Hero cover is by Chris Allen Hess on YouTube. It also includes Cade Kalka as a featured artist. And yeah, it's Dark Hero. It's still a good song, and they do a great job with it. So yeah, please enjoy that. Thank you so much for listening this week on Original Soundchat. We'll see you next time. Take care.